Hi everyone, and welcome back to another tutorial. Today's tutorial, I'll continue on the lab setup that I'm doing for 2025. Now instead of a Ubuntu server, I'm trying out the Alma Linux, which is similar distribution like the Red Hat, uh, and just to have a feel of how, you know, difference in configuration is. I'll upload the or publish the setup in my website so that you can go into the website and follow the steps if you need any specific area that you want to configure. So we'll look at a couple of configuration that we'll do. So we'll go through the basic setup and then look at the virtualization aspect of the Alma Linux as well, right? So we will update the operating system, change the password, host name, look at the firewall configuration, install the KVM and remote desktop so that we can manage it remotely. Okay, with that, let's hop over to the SSH session that I have established. Okay, so this is how it looks like. When I first log in, I've just reset my dedicated server so that we can start from scratch, right? So the first thing that we do is you can check the host or the Linux distribution by using the hostname ctl command, right? You can see this is the Alma Linux version 9.5 uh, and Linux kernel is 5.14, right? So this is technically a fresh install from the Contabo uh, Alma OS space, right? So first thing I would do is change the password. Actually, it's more important than updating, in my view. So I've allowed group login through SSH. You might want to change that in your Linux server, but I will change that later, right? For a start, I'm using root to log in, so I want to change my root password. So just type in passwd in the bash session that you want to change the password. That will give you a prompt to key in the new password. Just enter the new password. Reconfirm the password. And then it'll tell you that the password has been changed successfully. So this is usually the first step because by default, when Contabo sends you the server information, it also sends you the password. So you want to change that once you log into your system as soon as possible. Now the next is of course updating the OS as well as upgrading any of the packages with the new updates that are available. So the command, if you're not using, do use sudo apt. Okay, sorry. So for Ubuntu, you use apt. For Alma, you actually use DNF, right? And then do a update, right? So this gives you can do -yes to basically accept all the prompt, uh, and you will check for any updates that are available, right? Now, seems that there is no update because it's just fresh installed. Uh, if there's any update, you can then run the command sudo dnf uh, upgrade, right? So that will upgrade any of the updates that's available. So right now, all is good. There's no new updates or upgrade that is available. So that will give us the keep our operating system up to date. Okay, so now the other thing that you want to do is good practice to set up a user that belongs to the pseudo groups, right? And in Alma Linux, which is similar to Red Hat, they use Veo for the pseudo group. So what you want to do is to create a new user. So you can use user add. Oops, let's clear this. You can do user add demo, which is the username, right? And then you can also, you know, set up the default setting by doing -m -s, then give it a bin bash demo. Okay, so this will create the home directory and set bash as the default shell for demo. Okay, so you can do an ID demo to check which group it belongs to. So you can see that by default it belongs to only the demo group once you create it. Now, next what you want to do is to add the user, all right, to will by using the sudo user mode -a, add to the group will, and then the user you want to add to, right? So that gives you the ability to uh, add the user. Now you can delete the user using gpass -d demo will if you want to delete the user. Okay, so once that's done, the next thing we want to look at is the firewall. So I believe the default firewall for Alma should be firewall D. So there are a few commands that you can check, but I like the system's CTL status of let's say firewall D. Okay, you can see that it's loaded. So I really don't use firewall D especially in command line. Uh, the syntax is not difficult, but I'm used to IP tables and NF tables. So what we're gonna do is to delete the firewall, okay, so that it doesn't conflict with uh, the setup, right? Because you don't want to have two firewall running and then accidentally blocking the port if you forget to change one of the firewall setting. Although the firewall D builds on top of NF tables. Now, before we uninstall, we want to just do some basic configuration to disable the firewall D, right? Just some basic hygiene, right? And then at the same time, let's stop the firewall. Okay, so the command to uninstall the firewall is actually quite straightforward. It's actually using DNF, remove firewall D, right? So it'll ask you whether you want to delete the firewall and its unused dependency, just say yes, right? And that's it, right? So now if I do a systemctl status firewall D, I should see that it's no longer there, right? Firewall service is no longer available. Okay, so now that we have removed the firewall D, I believe the NF tables by default is also installed because firewall D builds on top NFT. So you can check whether NFT is there by doing a which NFT, right? So you see that, or if you see that which NFT is not there, there's a very high chance that uh, it's not installed. Can see, okay, so if it's not installed, right, and I might have removed NF tables when I uninstall firewall D. So the command to install NF tables is actually quite straightforward. If you are not using the root account, if you're not using a root account, then you need to enter sudo dnf install NF tables, right? So, okay, you will install both the NF tables and its library dependencies. Just click yes. Uh, it tells you that I want to import the GPG key. Yes. And then that's it. It installed the NF table, right? Not a good idea to expose your fingerprint, but it's a lab environment, so not to worry. Okay, so clear. Let me clear this, and then we can now do which NFT. We should see that is the NFT executable is inside user bin slash uh, backslash user backslash sbin, right? So we can also check the nftable version by doing nft version. Okay, we are using the 1.09 version, which should be the latest stable release. Now, you can use the command or you can be like me. I usually like to go uh, to the file directly. So default, the files is stored inside /etc, and it's a little bit different here in Alma Linux compared to Ubuntu. The config is stored in slash backslash etc slash sysconfig backslash uh, nftables.conf, right? So if you remember, Ubuntu is just inside slash backslash etc. Okay. Oops, sorry. So let's go to the folder. There's a lot of other config there, as you can see, but we want to edit the nftables config, right? Oops. Doesn't Okay, Alma Linux doesn't use Nano, it use VI, but I'm used to Nano. So let me do a Nano DNF install Nano. Should be the right command. Okay, I can do it. Okay, that's how you install Nano. Is the installation is actually much easier these days. Um, Now let's go and look at the nftable config file. Okay, so default you can see that the file is actually empty, right? And you can see that okay, when you do you can actually call or put the nft config into the nftables directory, and you can split it into various modules, right? For production environment, it's good to maintain different modules so that you know distinctively what are you changing. But for me, it's not a big deal. I'm going to change the nftable config directly later. Now, first before that, let's look at how do we use the nft command to add the rules, right? Uh, so we can use nft command to add, and always recommend to add the access rule first because you don't want to accidentally log yourself out. So the first rule that I usually add in most of my firewall is nft add rule allows you to add uh, to the table inet filter, and then the input chain. That means that traffic that is coming into your Alma Linux from the external. I always want to accept traffic from the loopback, right? Not much use right now, but as you start dwelling into IPsec and some of the more advanced networking stuff, the loopback interface does has its usefulness. Okay, so syntax is wrong. Let me check and issue the NFT add rule, inet filter input. Oops. Interface. Left out that. Okay, allow me to add. And if you are doing Alma Linux like me, you will face this problem because the default configuration, as you can see, uh, does not have the tables and chain defined, right? So that's one big one challenge that you face, but not to worry, you can always manually add the table, right? And let's see how we do it. Now, if you face this error, and let's also do a quick check, NFT list rule set, you can see that it's blank, right? So there's no table, no input chain defined. So first thing you want to do is to add a table, which is, let's do the standard INET table followed by a name for filter called filter. Okay, so if we look at the list rule now, we should see the table done, right? And then next, we want to add the input chain, right? So let's do this NFT add chain. We want to add the chain to the table. So you'll see very similar to IP tables, which is based on tables and chain, right? So when I add the chain, the input chain to the table, so we do NFT add chain to the interface Ethernet filter, the table filter, or I have named it filer instead of filter. We can change that later, which is fine. And then we will put in then followed by curly bracket. And then this type is a filter hook coming from input, and we can change the priority to 0, which is the lowest priority, and then close it, right? So now if I look at the list, I would have the input chain. Now you can do the same for the forward and output chain, right? So we're going to create the 3 basic chain first, and then the forward chain. Okay, now if I look at the IP list, we should have 3 chain all created, right? And default policy for the chain when you create is accept, so it doesn't accidentally block you. Okay, so what we want to do now is to create the basic rules like I've spoken about. You can find the rules in the config that I've done. So the first rule that we're going to add is the loopback interface accept. So we're going to accept the loopback interface. Oops, should be filler. My apologies, I named the table wrongly. So we're going to have to change that along the way. And then let's add the rules to, you know, okay, I want to keep all, status, especially the TCP packets that are already established or related, right? So any, established and related packet, we want to accept them. So we don't accidentally break the connection chain. Now the most important one, if you're doing remote access like me, you want to add the SSH connection, right, through TCP on port 22. You have not changed the SSH port, right, to accept, right? So without this, you're going to lock yourself out from the SSH session. So once you've done all this, you might put in HTTP, HTTPS, whichever that you need, right, to accept. And then once you've done all the accept, you want to add the drop command to drop all other packets. So NFT tables, like IP tables, are evaluated top down. So when you put in the drop rule at the end of the configuration, it will drop all other packets that are coming in. Okay, so that's a very quick way to, quick and basic ways to protect your server from the, from the internet, right? If you do not um, have the firewall D enabled. The good news for a lot of the Linux today, default they're all protected by firewall D, I think, when you install it. But I still like to do the old traditional way. So once this is done, right? If you've added in the configuration, but the firewall is not enabled yet, right? So if you look at the status of the nftables, we should, oops. Okay, so I've not enabled nftable. Okay, but let's look at the list, the rule first, right? So if we list the rule sets again, you have seen all the accept, right? Default policy accept. I have the drop rule here that will drop uh, the packets once you evaluate the first three basic configuration that we have. Okay, now what we want to do is to start the firewall, right? nftables. Oh, okay, so once we start the nftable service, we go to the status, we should see it right now. Okay, we can see that it's loaded, it's active, right? So a lot of this configuration that you see are not persistent. That means that if you stop here, when you reboot your system, you know, the firewall won't start and the config is not loaded, right? So let's fix the service first, right? You want to enable the nftable service. Oops, sorry. Okay, so this will create a symbolic link to the systemd daemon to default enable nftable when we start. Okay, so that's done. Now, if we look at the file config, right, nftables config, you can see that the config is all, everything is commented out. There's no rules here. So always remember, this is the file, right, that the firewall rules are safe, and when the system reboots, this is the file that it looks for the firewall rules. Now, it's a little bit, I don't really like the way, the conventional way of saving the rules, but this is the, default way of saving the rules. I'm pretty sure there are other ways you can save the rules, but, if I want to do command and everything else, it makes it a bit harder. But the default, or the documented way of staying the rule is doing the nft list rule set, right? And then like what this command says, okay, you want to save the configuration to the file, right? Which is something that you override all the commands and everything that's here, which I don't really like. You can add comments and whatnot, but you know you have to constantly change the commands, right? So not an ideal way of doing things, but this is the way to save the rule, right? So now if I do a cat of the files, you can see that now it is being saved, right? You can append, right? But appending means that it makes the rules a little bit harder as well. Like you can see, all the commands and the description has now been overwritten. Okay, I still like my comments, right? But this is the way to do it. Now, if I go do a ss minus lntp, I should be able to see that port 22 is listening, uh, which is good. Now, okay, so that's all you need to do for the firewall configuration. Uh, if you do any changes to the file, you can always restart the firewall service, right? So now the other way that we can do configuration is, of course, what I usually prefer after a while is to just come to this file, and change the setting, right? So I want to change this back to filter, right? Table name back to filter. I can change it here, save it. You can test a rule, I believe, but or you can just do a restart the firewall. Oops, not sure why. Okay, you can also use the CTL status to check whether it's okay. If there's any error, there's no error, right? So you should see the NF table starting, and then it finish the NF filter table. Now, if there's any error, you can then use the journal logs to look at the error, right? But now if I look at NF table, let's set. I should see that the table name has changed to filter. Okay, so you can either key in the command one by one, or you can, edit the config file, right? So depending on your preference, this is how you can quickly configure the firewall. Now I do add things like allowing specific IP address to a specific ports. They are, allowing IPsec ports to be open to a specific map public IP address. So you can do net, you can do a lot of what the typical firewalls can do. Now, if you are a person that prefer GUI, then I would recommend just stick with Firewall D because it has a GUI configurator, right? For me, I like the Linux part of it, a little bit more complex and very prone to syntax error when you start to do complex rule, but that's one way that I learn uh, better, right? But it all depends on what do you prefer. Okay, so that's pretty much the firewall. Now that we have finished the most part of the basic from step 1 to step 6. The next things that I like to do is usually install a remote GUI because I do like to configure my virtual machines using the virtual manager, the GUI version of it. So a remote, XRDP or a remote management through GUI is preferred, right? So there are a lot out there. You can use Genome, you can use like DM. There's a lot of various version or various you know uh, software applications packages that you can use. Uh, I like the lightweight XFCE, but I think there's some issue or you need to tweak the repository for XFCE. So I might change this to installing using Genome and XRDP. Pretty much the same, and I realized that the newer version, the performance is actually not that big a difference. The memory consumption is also not that huge and different. But I might be wrong, right? But depends on your preference. You can choose your own type of desktop environment. Okay, so we're going to install Genome, right? Installation is very easy. You can just do uh, DNF install Genome. Oops, can't remember the syntax. Let me check again. Okay, now before we install, let's check, right? What using the command DNF group at least to see what is available from the repository. Okay, it has a server with GUI, etc., etc. It's very similar to what Red Hat does. It groups a lot of the things that is there. Okay, so what we're going to do is to install the uh, server with GUI. Oops. Okay, we need to do group install. We'll install the server with GUI group with all the necessary components. You can see, all the components that they install. There's a whole bunch of them. You can read through and then say yes. It's quite a lot, 885 meg. It'll take a while. We'll fast forward this and come back when it's finished installing. Okay, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to install the whole packages. Once it's done, you'll see complete without any error. You can do a check to get, let's look at what are the default. Okay, okay, the current default is multi-user dot target. If you're not doing SSH, you're using direct attach, then you might want to change this to graphical, right? But not a big issue because we're using SSH, so we're gonna keep it that way. But I want to check the status of the GDM. Okay, you can see that we are using the Genome Desktop Manager. Services enabled. When you start, it should be enabled. Currently is inactive. Shouldn't be a big issue, right? We'll leave it there for now. Now, next, you can install VNC, or there are a few other remote UI management tool that you can use. But for this tutorial, or for a lot of my environment, I'm using either VNC or XRDP. I'm starting to like XRDP a little bit better from a management tool perspective because I can use the same management tools to manage both Windows RDP as well as using it for Linux XRDP. So it depends on your style, right? But I'm going to show you how to install the XRDP. Okay, so Alma Linux might be a little bit different from Ubuntu, but you can use the command install XRDP to install the RDP as well. But the challenge for the Alma Linux is that it is XRDP is not inside the default DNF, the repository tree for DNF. Now we can, I've actually not tried yum install XRDP. Let's just give it a try whether it works. Both doesn't work. Okay, so if you want to install XRDP, there's an additional step that you do. You need to install the EPL slash release to use the EPL repository. So EPL dash release. Okay, and then we're going to do minus yes just to not be prompted. So minus y means that you install. So we will use the uh, okay, the repository, right? Okay, you can enable this to enable. Let's just enable it. Okay. I don't think XRDP needs this, but let's just enable it because we're going to use the EPL repository, right? So now once we've done that, we should have no problem installing the XRDP. Okay, so now no problem, right? We're getting the package. Okay, looks good. Allow. Okay, should have put in minus y so we don't have to go through this, but it's not difficult to install this, so we're good. Okay, very fast, very quick. Now once it's done, we want to check. Believe I would have. Okay, it will tell you that XRDP is loaded, is inactive. So when you don't see it active means that you have to start it and enable it. So you can do this is system CTL start. Let's start XRDP daemon. Okay, let's do the status. Usually you shouldn't see any error and it listens on port 3389. You can change this port if you want on the config, but we're not going to do it now. But more importantly, I want to have this enabled when the Linux machine reboots, which is quite rare. Okay, by doing system CTL enable XRDP. Similarly, we'll create a symbolic link, right, to the system D service so that it will restart. It will start when the machine reboots. Okay, so that's all you need to do, and then you can do a verification to see what are the ports that is listening to in from a TCP connection perspective. You can see that it is listening at 3389 port 22. Can't remember what 631 is listening on. So, but uh, SSH, XRDP, right, is all turned on. So we're good. Now, the next step is we always we need to add um, the 3389 rules, right? You can either use the insert to allow 3389 port. You can either choose to insert using the command, or you can be like what I do. Come here and then at 3389, right? So that will allow XRDP and then restart the nftables. Okay, so that's good. Okay, now just to do a quick check, make sure that the rules is in effect. Okay, we can see that TCP port is enabled. Okay, so we have install XRDP. Now let's test, right, the XRDP session. Okay, so I have already configured this here. Let's go check it out. Okay, display. Okay, and then let's try and connect. Okay, not a good advice, but I'm connecting using root. Oh, we can actually now connect to demo. Okay, prompts you for the password. Oops. Oh, I don't think I have created a password for demo yet. Okay, so no worries. Let's do SU to demo. Okay, you can always do the minus sign, so when you switch root, it goes to the home directory. So let's set a password. Okay, forgot. I didn't set a password for. We can do a password reset for using the root account. Let's do it. Wrong. Got the password wrong again. That's the problem when you try to set a more secure password. Need to remember the sequence. Okay, now that should be okay. I might have to relaunch this, but let's try. Okay, we're good. Okay, so you can say, I actually quite like the new user interface, right? So now that we are logged in, let's just make it a little bit smaller so you can see it. Okay, now we can have logged into the GUI session of the Linux machine. Is actually quite fast, right? I, yeah, it used to be a little bit more slower when I'm doing XRDP. Now it seems to be a bit faster. So I'm going to like the genome desktop, right? It's actually quite nice. So we're gonna use it for a while until if the performance slow down. Okay, so that's installing the remote GUI. As you can see, I have my home lab where I have my Windows machine. So I use the Microsoft Remote Desktop to connect to all the servers that I'm managing. Okay, so that's pretty much what we have done for firewall, remote management UI. Next, what we want to do is to install the KVM. Okay, now first you want to check whether your machine supports virtualization. So if you see a number that is non-zero, in our case 80 means that it support. There are a few other utilities or command that you can do to check, but this is what I do, which gives me a good enough start. Now, once it's done, right, what we want to do is to install uh, the okay, oops, sorry, DNF install. Okay, there are a few packages that we want to install. So these are the common ones that we install: the QEMU KVM, library virtual, or the virtualization library, virtual manager, which is the UI uh, app that I use, virtual install for your command line installation or provisioning of the virtual machine, and then the bridge utilities, right? So these are the common ones that I install. There might be a few more depending on your use case that you install as well. Oops, I should have put the -y, right? Now, no worries, we'll just run through the installation. It's actually quite fast, right? It's much faster than installing the genome, right? There's only 108 packages that you need to install, so it's actually not too bad. We're gonna pause this and come back when this finishes installation. Okay, it's done. Takes less than 5 minutes. Okay, so once that's done, there are a few logistics that you want to do. First, we want to add uh, minus add to group. Uh, we add the user demo to the group. I believe KVM. Uh, so let me see, because you want to use demo to do the provisioning. Although I'm using root now, but usually recommended you want to use a sudo account or whale account in this case. And you want to add this to the various group, right? Can't remember whether I need to add to what is it, library virtual. There are a few others group that I usually add to, but bare minimum, make sure that you add to KVM and library virtual. Um, okay, yeah, I think this should be the two groups. As you can see, KVM and library virtual, that is good enough. Now, when you get hit into errors and they prompt you for groups, especially if you're looking at accessing files, folders, where you want to put it, then the CLang or the SE Linux control can be quite tight and you want to tweak that along the way. But this should be good enough for you to start. Okay, now if we go back to the XRDP, okay, launch a virtual shell. You can actually launch the okay, so you can see that there is errors, right? So this is the part that you need to make sure that you add to the right library, add the user, or I might just need to restart, right? So let's okay, like virtual daemon. Let's go back. Okay, yeah, I need to. Sorry, you need to restart the service. The virtualization library daemon, and then you will be able to connect, right? So that's one thing I realized as well. Now if I go to the connection detail, you can see there's a default network. You can change this along the way. You can edit the XML. You need to just go and change the settings, right? Under preference, I always like to do this. You can put the tray there so you can, uh, manage from a tray. Okay, so very simple, very fast. These are the things that I usually do to get my server in the internet set up, right, for my test environment. Okay, there are a few other tweaks, tips, and tricks that I will do in the next video um, on the GUI, the prompt, as well as configuration of the network IP addresses using the network manager. Now, there's a little bit of difference between using Ubuntu and Alma Linux when it comes to things like configuring a secondary IP address, creating a bridge, additional bridge um, from the OS, and Alma Linux has has a part of the configuration that you have to be careful because you might accidentally lock yourself out of your server if you don't configure it correctly, and that can be a big pain because you might need to reinstall your OS if you don't have console access like me when you are accessing over the internet and not having KVM enabled because you pay additional for enabling uh, local console or KVM access, local console access, right? And which I don't feel the need of spending the extra few dollars to just enable console, right? So uh, that's all for today's video. Uh, appreciate your time. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to part 2 of the Alma Linux setup. Thank you. Bye bye.